She did not raise her voice. The room was ordinary, the table crowded with envelopes, the light too bright for the mood that settled between us. Her confidence filled the space before her words did. When she spoke, it was deliberate, measured, and clean, like a line drawn to separate roles. She told me to handle my own bills if I believed myself intelligent. Nothing else followed. No argument. No escalation. Just a sentence placed carefully where it could not be taken back. In that instant, something fundamental shifted. I did not feel anger or embarrassment. I felt awareness. I understood that this was not about money, budgeting, or stress. It was about position. About who was allowed to carry weight and who was expected to obey quietly. The calmness of her delivery revealed more than shouting ever could. It showed me how long she had been rehearsing this moment, how certain she was that I would absorb it and move on as I always had. My mind moved faster than my emotions. I replayed years of decisions made for stability, choices framed as responsibility rather than sacrifice. I remembered how order had been mistaken for passivity and how consistency had slowly been rebranded as dependence. That sentence forced every overlooked detail into focus. I saw how often my silence had been interpreted as agreement rather than restraint. I saw how respect had been replaced by expectation. I stayed seated. I did not defend myself. I did not explain the logic behind what I carried or why I carried it. I realized explanations were no longer useful. They belonged to an earlier version of the relationship where understanding still mattered. What stood in front of me now was certainty. And certainty does not listen, it assumes. That night did not end with drama. We went about our routines. The house remained quiet. Yet everything had changed. The future rearranged itself without announcement. I knew then that a line had been crossed cleanly and permanently. I did not lose a partner in that moment. I lost an illusion. And in its place, something far more dangerous formed. A calm decision to stop being reduced to a function and to start paying attention to what had finally been said out loud. Clarity arrived quietly, steady and irreversible, guiding my next steps with patience, discipline, and an unshakable sense of self intact always. I paid every bill because I chose order over chaos. Stability mattered more to me than praise. I believed a home functioned best when one person absorbed pressure without announcing it. Over time, that choice became routine, then invisible. Comfort grew around my effort, quietly assumed, rarely acknowledged. From the outside, it may have looked like dependence, but it was intention. I was building predictability, not leaning on anyone, and certainly not asking permission to contribute to shared daily life. She mistook calm reliability for weakness. Because I never complained, she assumed I could not leave. Because I handled responsibility quietly, she believed it was effortless. What she missed was the discipline behind restraint. I tracked everything, understood every cost, and chose silence deliberately. That silence was not fear. It was control. And control, when unnoticed, invites those who mistake patience for permission. This misunderstanding slowly reshaped how she viewed power inside our relationship over many unexamined years together daily. I was never dependent on her approval or validation. My sense of worth came from competence and consistency, not applause. I paid because I could, not because I was trapped. I planned long-term, prepared exits, and kept my footing steady. Dependence clings. I never did. I was anchored. That difference mattered more than she realized, until the moment it finally surfaced. Years of quiet discipline supported that stability without ever needing recognition from anyone else present at the time. Looking back, I see how comfort can distort perception. When effort is consistent, people stop noticing it. When support never wavers, it becomes expected. I allowed that shift because peace seemed worth the cost. But peace built on imbalance is fragile. It relies on one person carrying silently while the other grows confident enough to forget why things work at all. That dynamic slowly rewrote our roles without discussion or mutual awareness until consequences became unavoidable and impossible to ignore. Her blind spot was assuming my discipline meant dependency. She stood confidently on a foundation she did not inspect. When someone believes control is permanent, they stop protecting it. I saw that clearly. And I understood then that misjudgment creates opportunity. Not for revenge, but for correction. Because when confidence rests on misunderstanding, the fall is never loud, only final. What followed began quietly and unfolded with precision over the weeks ahead, reshaping everything she assumed permanent about us both. I did not respond that night because reactions give arguments power. I let the sentence sit where she placed it and treated it like an instruction rather than an insult. The next morning, I moved deliberately, not emotionally. I opened my accounts, reviewed every obligation, and separated what was mine from what had quietly become assumed. It felt administrative, almost boring, which reassured me I was thinking clearly instead of acting wounded or impulsive. There was relief in structure, numbers, and routine, because structure does not argue, judge, or escalate situations when emotions usually try to take control away quickly. I canceled shared payments methodically and redirected income with precision. Utilities, insurance, subscriptions, and services were adjusted without discussion. I did not freeze accounts or create chaos. I simply removed myself as the default solution. Responsibility returned to its rightful owner without confrontation. This was not punishment. It was alignment. For years I had managed the system quietly. Now I stepped out of it, allowing reality to surface naturally without explanation or negotiation. Every change was clean, legal, and transparent, designed to reflect exactly what had been demanded without adding emotion, commentary, or justification of any kind at all times. Nothing was announced because mature decisions do not require speeches. Days passed before the impact became noticeable. Small transactions failed. Automatic renewals stopped. Convenience slowly eroded. I watched quietly, not with satisfaction, but with focus. I wanted to see how long confidence could survive once comfort disappeared. The shift was subtle, but it was constant, and it moved faster than I expected. I maintained routines, left for work on time, returned calmly, and spoke normally, ensuring the only variable changing was the structure she believed would never move under pressure, financial, practical, and psychological consequences unfolding daily, without confrontation or drama. What she expected was resistance or negotiation. What she encountered was absence. I was no longer managing outcomes or preventing friction. Each inconvenience forced a reckoning she had avoided. Questions surfaced but were left unasked. I had not changed my tone or behavior, which made the adjustment more unsettling. When stability vanishes without conflict, it exposes how fragile assumptions really are. She began recalculating silently, noticing gaps, delays, and responsibilities now resting where they always belonged, but had been conveniently overlooked for years by design, habit, and misplaced confidence in permanence rather than balance or mutual respect daily. Doing exactly what she said did not empower her. It clarified me. I learned how quickly words lose authority when taken literally. Her sentence was meant to diminish. Instead, it reorganized everything. I did not reclaim control through force. I reclaimed it through compliance. That distinction mattered. From that point forward, nothing in our life together rested on assumption again. Action replaced debate, structure replaced emotion, and the balance she dismissed as impossible became visible the moment I stopped absorbing what was never truly mine to carry, manage, or justify for the sake of peace alone any more quietly again today. The house did not explode into chaos after the changes began. It softened, almost hollowed, as routines lost their support. Lights stayed on, doors opened, meals happened, yet something essential was missing. Payments failed quietly, alerts replaced convenience, and time slowed inside the rooms. She noticed first through irritation, not understanding. Control rarely vanishes dramatically. It erodes through small interruptions that force attention, demanding effort where ease once lived comfortably without warning or explanation to those accustomed to comfort before. She tested the shift with humor first, light remarks meant to restore balance. When that failed, irritation followed, then precision. Questions landed casually, comments timed to create reaction. I answered neutrally or not at all. Silence unsettles people who rely on response to steer outcomes. I remained present but unavailable, calm but unreachable. This was not distance born of resentment. It was alignment taking shape through restraint within a household once structured around assumption rather than balance, effort, accountability, awareness. Daily life continued outwardly unchanged, which made the shift sharper. I left on schedule, returned on time, spoke evenly, maintained courtesy. There were no scenes, no confrontations, no explanations offered. The absence of reaction became the message itself. Stability without support reveals dependency quickly. Each inconvenience forced her to engage systems I had quietly managed for years, exposing how invisible labor becomes when it is consistent and expected without question, reflection, or appreciation over long periods of shared domestic life. The quiet was not cold, it was controlled. I was not withholding affection or kindness. I was simply no longer accessible on demand. Access is power when granted freely and rarely noticed until removed. She sensed the shift, but could not challenge it directly without admitting dependence. Silence held its ground, allowing reality to instruct where arguments once failed consistently through experience, repetition, and consequence, reshaping perception without debate or emotional escalation inside familiar spaces once taken for granted daily. By the end of the week, control had nowhere to land. It could not provoke, negotiate, or intimidate silence. What remained was awareness. Power had shifted without noise, without confrontation, without drama. The environment spoke clearly. I understood then that authority rooted in access collapses when access ends. Silence was not absence. It was structure returning to its rightful place within my life, my choices, and my sense of self, steady, intact, deliberate, and quietly unmovable from that moment forward. It happened late, when the house finally exhaled and confidence grew tired from holding its posture all day. She approached with a question shaped like curiosity, casual in tone, but weighted with expectation. It was meant to test whether the ground had softened. I looked up, listened fully, and answered without edge or hesitation. My calm was not rehearsed. It was settled. That stillness altered the room before any meaning reached her ears completely and unmistakably in that moment alone. She expected emotion because emotion invites negotiation. What she encountered was acceptance, and acceptance offers no leverage. I did not defend my choices or revisit old arguments. I did not explain timelines or sacrifices. I spoke plainly about what was, not what had been. That distinction mattered. Her confidence faltered because it had relied on my engagement. Without resistance, her strategy had nothing to press against or reshape. The realization unsettled her far more than anger ever could in silence. She sat down slowly, studying my face for signs of collapse that never came. I noticed her recalculating, measuring consequences she had never planned to carry herself. This was not about a missed payment. It was about the end of an arrangement that favored her certainty. The room felt heavier as the truth settled. Control dissolves quickly once the person enforcing it stops participating. That shift frightened her more than any raised voice could have at that moment alone now. She tried to regain footing by reframing the conversation, softening her tone, hinting at compromise. I did not interrupt or correct her. I simply listened. The absence of urgency unnerved her. When power expects reaction and receives patience, it collapses inward. I saw understanding replace calculation in her eyes. The leverage she believed permanent had expired quietly, without warning. Nothing dramatic occurred, yet everything she relied on shifted permanently in that shared space between us after midnight passed without ceremony. I understood then that bluffing requires noise, and certainty does not. I had accepted a reality she had not prepared for. Independence enforced exposes imbalance instantly. She was not afraid of responsibility. She was afraid of irrelevance. When leverage disappears, so does illusion. That night did not end the marriage, but it ended her authority. I slept knowing nothing would return to how it was. Clarity replaced conflict, and silence confirmed the truth completely without apology or regret from me. I had postponed my own comfort for years because peace felt more valuable than ease. I took on pressure quietly so the household could move smoothly without conflict. Decisions were made with long-term stability in mind, not personal reward. I chose predictability over preference, function over recognition. Over time, that choice became a habit, then an expectation. What began as generosity slowly transformed into an unspoken rule that my effort required no acknowledgement at any given moment, then now. She benefited from that stability daily while questioning its source. Bills were paid, problems solved, plans executed, yet the process remained invisible. Familiarity bred certainty, and certainty bred entitlement. She criticized what she no longer noticed, assuming support was automatic rather than deliberate. I watched how comfort reshaped perception, how consistency erased appreciation. The more reliable I became, the less visible my contribution appeared within the life we shared over time without question or reflection from her side at all. That awareness did not harden me, it refined me. I stopped framing the situation emotionally and started assessing it structurally. Who absorbed stress? Who enjoyed relief? Who adjusted when circumstances changed? The answers were clear once emotion stepped aside. I saw that fairness had been replaced by convenience, and convenience had been defended as normal. Precision replaced resentment, because understanding costs is the first step toward restoring balance within adult relationships built on responsibility and long-term trust alone always. I did not resent her comfort, I resented the distortion. The belief that contribution meant obligation rather than choice. I had given freely, but freedom disappears when choice is forgotten. That distinction sharpened my thinking. I was not correcting behavior. I was correcting a system that rewarded assumption. Once I saw it clearly, neutrality became impossible. Systems either adjust or collapse. I chose adjustment before collapse forced its own resolution upon everyone involved without warning or mercy later on suddenly. Understanding who benefited more ended any desire for revenge. Revenge seeks emotion, correction seeks alignment. I wanted truth to rebalance what silence had skewed. Adults know that peace maintained through self-erasure is not peace at all. It is delay. By acknowledging the cost I had carried, I reclaimed authority over my future choices. Not to punish, but to restore fairness where comfort had quietly replaced respect within our shared life as it truly was all along for years past. Her tone shifted before her posture did. Conversation slowed, words softened, and concern replaced certainty. She spoke about pressure and fatigue, about how things had become heavy lately. Partnership returned to her vocabulary as if it had never left. I listened without interrupting, noting the timing rather than the content. This was not reflection born of insight. It was adaptation born of discomfort. When stability disappears, people reach for language that promises balance without acknowledging what broke it previously quietly. She framed it as cooperation, as a shared effort to move forward together. The shift was careful, almost rehearsed. Stress became the explanation, misunderstanding the excuse. I watched how quickly tone adjusts when leverage weakens. She was not asking for peace. She was asking for access restored under softer terms. I stayed present and calm, understanding that negotiation begins when one side senses loss approaching. Experience teaches patience, timing, and restraint, especially when words return carrying convenience rather than accountability. I let her finish, then answered with a single line delivered evenly. I explained that cooperation survives only where respect remains mandatory. No lecture followed. No history lesson. My voice stayed level, my posture unchanged. The weight of that sentence did the work I refused to perform. It closed doors gently rather than slamming them, leaving no space for debate or reinterpretation. The moment settled quickly, signaling boundaries rebuilt without hostility, drama, urgency, repetition, pressure, guilt, persuasion, or appeals remaining. Silence followed, heavier than any argument we had ever had. She searched my face for flexibility and found none. Not anger, not pride, just resolve. I did not enjoy the moment, but I did not retreat from it. When rules change, discomfort is inevitable. What matters is whether clarity replaces confusion and whether respect returns as a condition rather than a request. This understanding marked maturity, consequence, and boundaries tested without hostility, excuses, manipulation, bargaining, pressure, delay, denial, reversal, theatrics. That night reset the terms permanently. Language lost its power to bend reality. I understood that teamwork without respect is performance, not partnership. She understood something else entirely. The old dynamic was finished. From that point forward, interaction required equality rather than convenience. Silence did not punish. It clarified. And clarity, once introduced, never asks permission to remain. It stands steady, reshaping decisions, behavior, expectations, futures, commitments, accountability, dignity, balance, effort, trust, boundaries, direction, selfhood, maturity, presence, patience, resolve, permanence. I did not leave with more money or lighter responsibilities. I left with clarity that settled deeper than any victory. I understood that strength is not measured by how much one can carry, but by knowing when carrying becomes erasure. For years I believed endurance was noble. I now see endurance without boundaries only trains others to expect silence. Walking away was not failure. It was recognition arriving late, but necessary. At last I chose myself deliberately without guilt attached. I learned that paying everything did not make me dependable. It made me invisible. The smoother life became, the less my presence was noticed. Support turned into expectation, and expectation slowly replaced appreciation. This shift happens quietly in long relationships, especially when responsibility is consistent. People stop asking who holds the weight. They only notice when the ground moves. When I stepped back, reality finally spoke where explanations had failed. That silence ended all debate permanently for me without regret. What stayed with me most was the lesson about boundaries. Love without limits invites misuse, even unintentionally. When one person gives endlessly, balance disappears and roles distort. I had confused sacrifice with commitment and patience with loyalty. Maturity taught me that boundaries protect connection rather than threaten it. The moment I enforced them, respect either returned or revealed itself absent. Both outcomes were useful. Neither required anger or revenge. They simply clarified the truth I needed to move forward calmly. I also learned something uncomfortable about identity. Being reliable can trap a man in a role he never agreed to permanently. Once assigned, that role is defended by those who benefit from it. When you step outside it, resistance appears disguised as concern. I recognized that pattern immediately. It confirmed my decision was correct. Growth often feels like betrayal to people invested in your predictability. Accepting that cost freed me. It allowed me to redefine myself fully with clarity intact. I did not leave angry or triumphant. I left grounded, aware, and finished with confusion. I know now that self-respect is not loud. It does not announce departures or demand validation. It chooses alignment and lets consequences unfold naturally. Walking away was not punishment. It was maintenance. The smartest response was not defiance, but obedience to the challenge itself. I paid my own bills and reclaimed my life quietly. That choice changed everything permanently for me in the end.